"You're just a bitter, broken woman who never left this town," he screamed. I replied, "No, I'm the woman who saved Grandma while you stole from her grave. Can you imagine dedicating years of your life, sacrificing your dreams, your relationships, your very sense of self, for someone you love, only to have a greedy relative sweep in and steal the recognition, the resources, and even the emotional legacy you built? Can you imagine watching the person you poured your heart into be manipulated by someone who saw them only as a means to an end, a source to be bled dry? My name is Alara. I'm 30 years old, a nurse in a small, sleepy town in coastal Maine, and this is the story of how my Uncle Robert, a man I once looked up to, stripped me bare emotionally, exploited my love, and almost destroyed my faith in family, until I finally found the strength to fight back for what was truly mine, my integrity and peace. It began almost 6 years ago, though the seeds were sown long before that. Grandma Evelyn, my rock, my anchor in a childhood that often felt chaotic and lonely, started showing signs of cognitive decline. Subtle at first, misplaced keys, forgotten appointments, then more pronounced. I was fresh out of nursing school, working my first gig at the regional hospital, dreaming of specializing in critical care, and maybe one day moving to Boston, a place that felt vibrant and alive, a stark contrast to our quiet town of Camden. But Grandma Evelyn, with her sea-glass eyes and hands that always smelled faintly of lavender and salt, needed me. She was the one who nurtured my love for books, who taught me to knit, who listened without judgment when my parents were too busy with their own dramas. She was the first person who ever made me feel truly seen, truly valued. My parents lived a town over, caught up in their own lives, their own responsibilities. Uncle Robert, Grandma's only son, lived a few hours south in Portland, a world away in our small-town estimation. He'd visit for holidays, charm Grandma with stories of his big city business ventures. Vague, always sounding on the cusp of booming, never quite delivering. He was the golden child, the son who could do no wrong in Grandma's eyes, even when his promises were as thin as the sea fog that rolled in over Penobscot Bay. I, on the other hand, was the quiet, dutiful granddaughter, the one who brought her groceries, drove her to appointments, fixed her leaky faucet. The one who did, not just promised. When Grandma's memory really started to fade, the doctor suggested she shouldn't live alone anymore. My heart leaped into my throat. I pictured her in a sterile nursing home, her spark dimming, and the thought was unbearable. I had just saved up enough for a down payment on a small condo, a step towards independence. My career was finally taking off, getting me noticed for my calm demeanor and quick thinking in emergencies. But Grandma's face, etched with a quiet fear she tried to hide, made my decision for me. My chest felt tight, a familiar ache of self-sacrifice settling in. I couldn't let her go through that alone. I sat my parents down, proposing I move into Grandma's quaint clapboard house. The house where I'd spent countless summers, where every creak and groan was a memory. They sighed with relief. "Oh, Alara, you're such a good girl," my mother said, kissing my cheek. Dad nodded. "Evelyn always loved you best, she'll be so happy." The words, meant to be kind, still pricked. They always acknowledged my goodness, my responsibility, never quite my personal desires or aspirations. Uncle Robert, when I called him, was effusive. "That's fantastic, Alara. What a saint you are. I knew I could count on you. I'll chip in, of course, absolutely. We're family, after all." His voice was smooth as the polished stones on the beach, full of easy promises. I believed him, or rather, I desperately wanted to believe him. The freeze/fawn response had me nodding along, my mouth saying, "Yes, that would be wonderful," even as a tiny, cynical voice in my head whispered, "Don't count on it." So I sold my condo savings, not just delaying my own home ownership, but actually liquidating the fund, and moved into Grandma Evelyn's spare room. I took on night shifts at the hospital, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., so I could be home during the day to manage Grandma's medications, cook her meals, help her bathe, and just be there, a constant presence. My world shrank to the perimeter of Grandma's house and the hospital's sterile halls. My social life evaporated. Dates were impossible. My friendships grew distant. But when Grandma would look at me, her eyes filled with gratitude, whispering, "You're my angel, Alara," it felt like enough. It had to be enough. My psychological wound, this need to earn love through unwavering service, pulsed with renewed purpose. Uncle Robert's, chipping in, amounted to an occasional $50 bill tucked into Grandma's purse during his infrequent visits, always accompanied by a grand pronouncement of how he was taking care of everything. He'd call once a week sometimes, but mostly he'd call Grandma directly, charming her, asking about her day, completely oblivious to the intricate web of care I was weaving around her. He'd talk about setting up her affairs, making sure everything was in order. A responsible son making sure his mother was secure. I didn't question it. I was too exhausted, too focused on the daily grind of caregiving, too deeply entrenched in my role as the betrayed caregiver, blind to the true nature of the greedy relative. My salary as a nurse wasn't huge, especially in a small town, but it covered the groceries, her co-pays, and the rising costs of her specific dietary needs. My small personal savings started to dwindle further, used for emergency home repairs or unexpected medical supplies. I kept a meticulous ledger, assuming that when things were sorted, I would be reimbursed. It was naive, yes, but I was operating from a place of love and trust, not legal savvy. Months turned into years. Grandma Evelyn's condition worsened, her moments of clarity becoming fewer and farther between. She'd call me by my mother's name sometimes, or mistake me for a sister she hadn't seen in decades. It was heartbreaking, each forgotten memory a tiny erosion of the vibrant woman I knew. During this time, Uncle Robert became more involved superficially. He'd visit for a weekend, taking Grandma out for ice cream, snapping cheerful photos for Facebook, portraying himself as the devoted son. He even suggested getting a power of attorney to manage Grandma's finances properly. He claimed it was to protect her from scams, to ensure her investments were solid. I was so overwhelmed, so physically and emotionally drained, I let him handle it. My chest felt heavy, a dull ache that had become my constant companion. I didn't want to deal with the mountain of paperwork, the convoluted financial statements. He was family. He promised he had Grandma's best interests at heart. My human flaw, my tendency to trust the wrong person, to avoid conflict, especially with family, led me to ignore the glaring red flags. "Alara, you worry too much," he'd say, flashing his easy smile. "I've got this. Grandma trusts me. You just focus on her care." And I did. I focused on her care. I focused on changing soiled sheets, on pureeing her food, on holding her hand through the long, confusing nights when she'd cry out for her long-dead mother. I put my life on hold, my career ambitions slowly fading into the background, my personal growth stunted by the constant demands. The silence of the house after Grandma finally fell asleep was sometimes so profound it felt like a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I'd collapse onto the worn armchair, staring out at the inky blackness of the Maine coast, wondering what my life would have been if I hadn't chosen this path. But then I'd remember her smile, the way she'd squeeze my hand, and the guilt would wash over me, locking me back into place. Then Grandma Evelyn passed away peacefully in her sleep, her hand still clasped in mine. The grief was a physical blow, a gaping wound that left me numb and untethered. The only constant in my adult life was gone. The funeral was a blur of sympathetic faces, casseroles, and the overwhelming scent of lilies. Uncle Robert delivered a moving eulogy, choked with emotion, talking about his devotion to his mother, his deep concern for her well-being. He even mentioned my tireless efforts in a passing sentence, a lukewarm acknowledgement swallowed by the torrent of his own self-aggrandizement. I gripped the wooden pew, my knuckles white, a silent scream building in my throat. My throat felt tight, a bitter taste in my mouth. Even in her death, I was overlooked. The will reading was held at the local lawyer's office, a stuffy room filled with antique furniture and the smell of old paper. My parents were there, looking uncomfortable. Uncle Robert arrived, impeccably dressed, looking suitably somber. I sat there, my heart pounding, a strange mix of dread and hope swirling inside me. I wasn't expecting a fortune, but I had a quiet expectation that my years of sacrifice, my financial contributions, would be acknowledged, would be validated. I believed Grandma, in her own way, would have ensured I was taken care of. After all, Robert had always hinted at it, told me not to worry. This was the moment I hoped to finally feel seen. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat and began to read. Most of Grandma Evelyn's modest estate, the house, her savings, a small investment portfolio, was bequeathed entirely to Uncle Robert. "And to my dear granddaughter, Alara," he droned, "I leave my antique cedar chest and its contents as a token of my love and appreciation." My blood ran cold. The cedar chest? The one filled with old linens and faded photographs? That was it. My chest constricted, a sudden sharp pain. My mind reeled. Years. Years of my life, my savings, my youth, reduced to a sentimental antique and a vague platitude. Robert sat across from me, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips, quickly masked by a somber nod. He didn't meet my eyes. I stared at the lawyer, my mouth dry. "Mr. Henderson," I managed to choke out. "There must be some mistake. I've been caring for Grandma Evelyn full-time for 6 years. I put my life on hold. I used my own money for her care." He looked at me with a pained expression, a man caught between family drama and legal duty. "Ms. Peterson, the will clearly states, and Mr. Robert Peterson has a notarized document here indicating that he provided significant financial support to his mother over the last few years, allowing her to stay in her home. These loans from Mr. Peterson were clearly intended to be repaid from the estate." My head snapped towards Robert, who was now staring intently at the antique grandfather clock in the corner. Financial support? Loans? He hadn't contributed a dime. This was the initial act of betrayal, raw and stinging, but now layered with a new, cruel twist. My blood boiled. "What financial support?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "He gave her $50 for ice cream once a month. I quit my life for her. I bought her medications. I paid for the modifications to the bathroom, so she wouldn't fall. I paid for everything that wasn't covered by her insurance." Robert finally looked at me, his eyes cold. "Elara, don't be hysterical. Grandma knew what she was doing. I simply formalized the arrangement she wanted. She wanted to ensure I was taken care of, as her only son." My parents shifted uncomfortably, their faces a mixture of embarrassment and helplessness. They didn't speak up. They didn't defend me. My sense of betrayal deepened, extending beyond Robert to my own mother and father, who allowed this injustice to unfold. It was like a replay of every childhood moment where Robert was excused, celebrated, and I was silently expected to pick up the pieces. The old wound of being the overlooked achiever versus the performative family member, mixed with being the caregiver, was tearing me apart. My stomach churned, a bitter bile rising in my throat. I left the lawyer's office in a daze, the small-town streets blurring through my tear-filled eyes. I drove straight to Grandma Evelyn's house, now no longer truly hers but Robert's. The key still worked in the lock. I walked through the quiet rooms, each filled with echoes of her laughter, her stories, her presence. I picked up a framed photograph of her and me, beaming, on her 80th birthday. My chest ached with a pain so profound it stole my breath. It wasn't just the money, not just the house. It was the absolute invalidation of my sacrifice, the erasure of my years of love. It was the knowledge that Robert had not only exploited Grandma, but he had leveraged my love for her against me. He had weaponized my care. He used the very thing that was pure and good within me to further his own greedy agenda. The feeling of being so thoroughly used, so completely taken for granted, was soul-crushing. My thinking spiraled. Was I stupid? Was I weak? Did Grandma actually not care about me as much as I thought? My parents called later that night. "Elara, honey, you need to understand." Robert was struggling. He had debts. Grandma probably wanted to help him. My mother's voice was laced with a familiar guilt-tripping tone. "And you know he's her son. That's different. Different. Always different. So, my years of sacrificing my life, my savings, my career, that's just my duty? And his debts, his irresponsibility, that gets rewarded with Grandma's entire estate." I bit out, my voice dangerously low. "It's not fair, Elara," my father chimed in. "But sometimes life isn't fair. You'll move on. You always do. You're strong. Strong." The word felt like a brand, a burden, not a compliment. They wanted me to be strong, to be the one who quietly absorbed the unfairness, so they wouldn't have to deal with the messy consequences. My hands trembled, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. My whole body was vibrating with suppressed anger and a crushing sense of isolation. Robert started emptying the house within days. He called me, his voice annoyingly cheerful, asking if I wanted the cedar chest. "Just let me know when you'll be by. I need to get this place on the market quickly." He was selling Grandma's house, our family home, as fast as he could. My heart pounded, a frantic drum in my ears. The raw internal conflict raged. Part of me wanted to curl up and disappear, to let the world swallow me whole. The other part, a small, fierce spark, ignited with righteous fury. He was desecrating her memory, erasing her presence, all for a quick buck. He saw her home, not as a repository of love and history, but as an asset to liquidate. This was not just financial loss. It was the ultimate insult to the emotional currency of my care. The gaslighting intensified. Robert began telling everyone in town that I was being difficult and unreasonable. Poor Alara, he'd sigh to sympathetic neighbors. She's just having trouble letting go. She was so attached to Grandma. It's a sad situation, really, how she's trying to stir up trouble after Evelyn passed. The small-town grapevine buzzed. People at the grocery store, at the local diner where I sometimes grabbed coffee before a night shift, started giving me strange looks. The casual greetings became stiff. I could feel their whispers, their judgments, following me. My reputation, built on years of being a reliable, kind-hearted nurse, a respected member of the community, was being systematically dismantled by Robert's carefully crafted narrative. This was his public and social destruction attempt, and it was working. My chest pressure returned, a constant, suffocating weight. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of unspoken accusations. I tried to talk to my oldest friend, Sarah, who worked as a dental hygienist in town. I explained everything, the years of care, the empty promises, Robert's manipulation. She listened, her brow furrowed. "Alara, honey, I believe you," she said, squeezing my hand. "But everyone here loves Robert. He's so charming, so successful. No one wants to believe he could do something like this. And frankly, people don't like family drama, especially around an inheritance." The truth of her words hit me hard. In a small town, reputation was everything. And Robert, with his polished exterior and his strategically placed tears at the funeral, had effectively poisoned the well. My feeling of isolation deepened. Not only had my own family betrayed me, but my community was turning its back, buying into Robert's lies. I felt utterly alone, lost in a thinking spiral of self-doubt and despair. Had I imagined it all? Was I truly just bitter, as Robert subtly suggested? Then came the moment that changed everything. I was at the hospital, grabbing a coffee before my shift. I overheard two older nurses, both friends of Grandma Evelyn, whispering about me. "Can you believe Alara? So ungrateful. Robert did so much for Evelyn, and now she's trying to drag his name through the mud." One of them, Martha, even looked directly at me with a disapproving frown. My blood ran cold, then hot with shame and fury. Martha had brought me countless casseroles while I cared for Grandma. She knew the truth, or at least she should have. This was more than just gossip. It was a personal affront, a dismissal of everything I was. My heart hammered against my ribs, a painful throb. This wasn't just about money. It was about my honor, my very identity as a good, caring person being publicly tarnished. I walked over to their table, my legs feeling like jelly, but my resolve hardening with every step. My voice, usually calm and steady, was trembling. "Martha," I said, "you know what I did for Grandma. You saw it. You saw me. Don't you dare tell me I'm ungrateful." Martha's face flushed. "Well, Alara, Robert said he was giving her a lot of money to keep the house up. He said you were just doing your duty." The phrase again. Your duty. That was the mid-story twist right there. Robert wasn't just greedy. He was using the small-town expectation of duty and family to actively discredit me, to turn my years of selflessness into a weapon against me. He was leveraging the community's ingrained belief that the man of the family, the son, always had the primary claim, while the daughter/granddaughter was just performing expected service. It was rooted in a deeper resentment, a jealousy perhaps, that Grandma Evelyn cherished my practical care, my constant presence, more than his performative gestures. My years of silent support were simply being reframed as something expected, something owed, while his hollow actions were amplified into noble sacrifice. This was not just about the inheritance, it was about his desperate need to be seen as the hero, at my expense. I stared at Martha, numb. "He said that? Did he also say he hadn't contributed a single dollar towards her medical care? Did he say I drained my entire savings to keep her comfortable?" My voice was rising, attracting attention. Martha looked away, uncomfortable. "Well, Alara, you just need to move on. Move on. Everyone wanted me to move on. Move on from years of my life. Move on from a profound betrayal. Move on from having my love and sacrifice wiped clean." My anger, long suppressed, finally surged. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the fundamental truth, about reclaiming my narrative from his poisonous lies. I couldn't move on until I cleared my name, until I exposed him. My internal monologue was a torrent of rage and resolve. I called my parents one last time, my voice devoid of emotion. "I'm calling a family meeting. Everyone, Robert included. Sunday at the community hall. If you don't come, You're choosing his lies over my truth. And there will be consequences for that choice. The silence on the other end was deafening. My father eventually stammered, Alara, don't do this. You're going to tear the family apart. No, I replied, my voice steady now. Robert already did that. I'm just exposing the wreckage. I hung up before they could reply, my heart pounding, but a strange sense of calm settling over me. The decision was made. The confrontation was coming. The catharsis, I prayed, would follow. The community hall, a drafty old building with fluorescent lights, felt like a stage. Sunday afternoon. My parents arrived, looking tense and uncomfortable. My Aunt Carol and Uncle Bill, who lived an hour away, were also there, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. And then Robert walked in, impeccably dressed as always, an air of aggrieved dignity about him. He barely glanced at me, taking a seat furthest from me, next to my parents. The air was thick with unspoken tension, the silence punctuated by the hum of the old heating system. My hands trembled, but I clasped them tightly, drawing strength from the years of quiet resilience that had defined me. This was it. No turning back. I stood in front of them, my voice surprisingly clear, despite the tremor in my chest. Thank you all for coming. I know this is uncomfortable, but it needs to be said. For 6 years, I dedicated my life to Grandma Evelyn. I moved into her home, worked night shifts to care for her during the day, and drained my savings to ensure her comfort and dignity. I pulled out a meticulously organized folder. Here are the receipts for medical supplies not covered by insurance, home modifications, and groceries I personally paid for. I placed the folder on the table. Here are my hospital schedules, showing the night shifts I worked. Here are the bank statements from my liquidated condo savings, which went directly to supporting Grandma. My voice gained strength, a steady pulse of raw emotion. I did this out of love. Pure, unadulterated love for a woman who was like a mother to me. I turned to Robert, my gaze unwavering. Robert, you promised to chip in. You promised I would be reimbursed. You even told me that Grandma wanted me to be taken care of in her will, for my service. Robert scoffed, his face turning red. Alara, you're being ridiculous. Grandma was elderly. She made her own decisions. I merely helped her manage things. You did your duty, that's what family does. The word duty sliced through me. Duty. Is it my duty to sacrifice everything, while you, her only son, disappear for months, then show up with empty promises and a falsified loan document? My voice rose, cutting through his bluster. Did you tell them about the significant financial support you supposedly gave Grandma, the loans that entitled you to her entire estate? Robert jumped up, pointing a furious finger at me. You're just a bitter, broken woman who never left this town. You're jealous that Grandma finally saw my worth, that she appreciated my business acumen and trusted me with her legacy. You're nothing but a resentful small-town nurse clinging to scraps. His words, meant to wound, actually solidified my resolve. They confirmed every cruel thought he had always harbored, every dismissal of my worth. They laid bare his true motive, jealousy, resentment, and a desperate need to diminish me to elevate himself. My chest ached, not from pain, but from the immense pressure of years of unspoken truths finally bursting forth. No, Robert, I replied, my voice cutting through the hall. I'm the woman who saved Grandma, while you stole from her grave. You didn't give her financial support. You manipulated a vulnerable old woman. You forged documents or coerced her into signing them. You weren't a loving son. You were a leech, preying on her trust. And you weren't concerned with her legacy. You were concerned with her money, so you could prop up your pathetic failures and pretend you were a success. I saw a flicker of genuine shock on his face, a raw vulnerability that quickly hardened into rage. My parents stared aghast. Then came the final twist, the brutal emotional checkmate. Cornered, red-faced, and sputtering, Robert threw his last desperate punch. You think you're so noble? She never truly appreciated you anyway. She always complained about how much work you were, always sighing about having to keep up appearances for the town because you were living with her. She called you a burden, Alara. A burden. He spat the words, venomous, thinking he had finally found the emotional blow that would shatter me. My breath hitched. My entire body went cold. A burden. The old woman who called me her angel, who held my hand, who taught me how to live, thought I was a burden? For a split second, the world spun. The deepest psychological wound, the fear that my love and service were always just an obligation, not a cherished gift, ripped open. My childhood wound of needing to earn love through sacrifice, resurfaced with agonizing clarity. I stood there, utterly exposed, my face probably stark white. But then, as I looked at Robert's contorted, hateful face, something clicked. A clarity I had never known. The woman I cared for, the Grandma Evelyn who loved me, would never have said that. That wasn't her. That was Robert, twisting reality, projecting his own ugliness onto her memory. That was his voice, his resentment, not hers. The truth of his profound malice, his utter disregard for Evelyn, not just me, shone through. He was so desperate to hurt me, he was willing to desecrate her memory, their own mother's memory, with a lie. My eyes met his, and a calm, terrifying resolve settled over me. "You're lying," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. "That wasn't Grandma. That was you, Robert. You were the burden. You were the one who broke her heart, not me. You wanted her money, but you never loved her. I gave her my life. You just took hers." The silence in the hall was absolute. My parents were crying quietly. Aunt Carol looked physically ill. Robert sank back into his chair, defeated, his mask finally shattered. He had nothing left to say. He had no more lies to tell. He had just revealed the true, callous indifference he held for his own mother, exposing him for the vile parasite he truly was. I didn't get all the money back through any official channels. In a small town, without a concrete, legally binding contract signed by Evelyn when she was of sound mind, it would have been a long, drawn-out legal battle that would have financially and emotionally ruined me further. But that wasn't the point anymore. The point was the truth. The point was the catharsis of speaking my truth, of finally being heard, of exposing Robert for the manipulator he was, not just to me, but to the people who mattered. I left that hall and walked out into the cool Maine air, the scent of pine and ocean filling my lungs. My entire body felt light, untethered. The constant chest pressure, the knot in my stomach, the invisible weight on my shoulders, it was gone. The air felt cleaner, the sky brighter. I had finally severed the cord, not just with Robert, but with the version of myself that believed I had to earn love through endless sacrifice. I moved out of Grandma's house that week, finding a small apartment down the coast in Bath, a town just big enough to offer anonymity, but small enough to feel like home. I took the cedar chest. It now sits in my living room, filled with Evelyn's old letters and my nursing awards. It's been over a year since that day. Robert sold Grandma's house, pocketed the money, and eventually drifted out of town, his reputation in tatters amongst those who actually knew the truth, not just his charming facade. My parents are still navigating their own guilt and shame, but they call me differently now, with a hesitant respect I never had before. I'm focusing on my career again, taking those critical care courses I deferred for so long. I'm dating a wonderful man who sees me, truly sees me, for who I am, not what I can do for him. I've come so far from that girl who believed her worth was tied to her usefulness, to the constant need to prove her love through sacrifice. The part of myself I reclaimed was my voice, my boundaries, and my inherent value. I learned that love isn't something you earn through suffering, it's something you deserve. The psychological wound of being the overlooked caregiver, always needing to perform to be seen, has finally truly healed. I am no longer defined by what I give, but by who I am. And for the first time in my life, that feels like more than enough. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between keeping the peace and speaking your truth, even if it meant tearing down years of family facade? How did you find your voice? Share your stories below. And if my journey resonated with you, consider hitting that subscribe button. Your support helps me keep sharing these raw, honest truths, and it means the world to know I'm not alone.